What's up, guys? Today we'd like to talk about Tailscale because I fumbled around a bit with it today because I had the issue that I have a few services that I want to keep private and I have a few services that I want to expose to the public. And the first thing that comes in mind when you want to do this is a VPN. And you could set up a VPN server that is essentially the gateway for, or like it is makes it possible for you to keep a bunch of services private to you, so no one else can access it unless they are connected to the VPN. You know the concept, but yeah. And I just wanted to talk about Tailscale because uh, Tailscale is really awesome because you do not have to set up your own VPN server. You can just use their software or like their clients in order to connect to the network and then essentially have a VPN without the need to set up your own VPN server. So that's a really cool service for that. And I've discovered a feature because um, I was then in a position that I wanted to make a few services that I had private, so no one else could access them, and I could just access them through the VPN. So that was kind of my intention. So that's that's kind of the requirement I had, and I was using Tailscale, and then I was wondering how I could open the services only for um, network requests that would come in through the Tailscale network. So it would actually be protected. And I was configuring my proxy server. I used Caddy, and yeah, I wasn't really satisfied with it. Or rather, when I was looking around on the Tailscale interface, I saw that there was an option for services. And services is essentially a feature from Tailscale where they make it possible for you to connect to services that you got hosted in your network and just make it possible to have a domain on it. Because that's essentially what I wanted to have. I wanted to have a domain because most of the time you need uh, HTTPS encryption in order to run the services properly. For instance, NAN, the default setting for this platform is that it requires HTTPS, and I just wanted to have the comfort of using HTTPS because otherwise you would always get the warnings from browsers where they are telling you that you're using HTTP and you shouldn't do that, or like they advise against it, or it's like always not the right way to do it, or whatever. And so that's kind of why I wanted to have a setup where I have domains and make them connected to my services. So I have a convenient way of accessing them, and yeah, then I was just looking for a domain, and the first thing that I did was just actually look for a domain on domain providers, and I thought would be a bit cumbersome to actually buy a domain and pay for it annually just in order to have some services that are gonna be used only by you anyways. So that is why I came to the service NoIP, and they offer some free subdomains, so you can host your services under a domain without having to pay for um, any kind of domain. So that's kind of the thing that I found that worked. And for public services, it's really nice. I've got a few services for people that I know that do not use a VPN, or I do not want them to be obligated to use a VPN. So they are accessing the platforms using just a public IP. So there is no VPN involved in that in any kind of way. So they can just access the server without needing a VPN connection. And I have some other services that I want to keep private, like paperless. There are some documents on there that I just do not want to expose to the internet, and that is why initially I just wanted to set it up with VPN, with an VPN, and that's kind of how I got to Tailscale. And in order to set that up with a proxy server, you would just need to add some kind of config to not allow traffic from the outside world to get in, like from networks that aren't within the VPN to process this request. And if we are then taking a look at Tailscale, it provides this really nice service to just give you the VPN, but you obviously also need to protect your services. And I saw that Tailscale provides a new feature that is called services, and when you go on there, you can add new services, and these services are then gonna get a domain, and you can add on port, and just by setting this up, you can actually connect to your service. So we have Tailscale here, and they have essentially this new feature that it's called services, and I wanted to make use of it by essentially then driving the traffic through my actual machines. So we have my nodes, and in services you can define, for instance, paperless, and then it's some kind of tailnet domain, and we say that's the domain the service is going to give us. And then we have a node, and that's like the machine name, and you get domains for all of those. Essentially they're obviously only available in your private network, in your Tailscale VPN network, but you can essentially set up services, and by doing that, these services are then protected because they're in the Tailscale network, obviously. And I'm going to draw some arrows here so you can understand how the requests are then going to come in. Like, this is the internet, and the internet is essentially routing the requests through the node 1. That's going to happen internally at Tailscale, and when the request is coming in, it's going to come in on this domain. So I'm going to put this here, and Tailscale essentially routes the request then further to the node, to the actual machine that is hosting the service. So we have an error here, and we're going to connect it to the nodes here. So it's going to come in, and at the services it's going to look up what kind of machine is going to host it. You need to define in the Tailscale interface where you want to have this request being routed to. So you have to add the nodes to Tailscale. And the cool thing is you can even add multiple machines here. So you could even add like machine 2, and then if machine 1 breaks down, it's going to check based on your geo position where you are and what is the most nearby kind of machine, and therefore it's going to essentially make an order for what kind of node is going to serve your request. So if node M1 is going to die down, M2 is going to be used, and M1 is the most nearby kind of service you can get. So that's kind of why it uses this one first, and that's kind of how the whole process works. And yeah, that is the cool thing about Tailscale, or this service feature. You do not have to worry about the domain. That's like the first thing I was having, like the first issue that I was having, what kind of domain I'm going to use for this private service. I do not want to always connect using the IP address. I want to connect using an actual real name, and that's kind of where the Tailscale service features really helped out, because it essentially did exactly that. It gave me a name that I could connect to a domain, or like to my service, or a domain to my service. And I think you're not limited to how many services you can set up. And if you're just looking for a solution to set up tools in your internal own network, then Tailscale gives you the best opportunity to do so, because it is the cheapest one. You do not have to buy a domain. You're protected. You do not have to set up an own VPN server. You only need to, use their platform, and that's about it. Obviously, requests are always going to go through their network, which is the not that good thing about this whole thing, that you have to essentially trust them to not process your requests in any kind of way, and not in a kind of bad way, you know what I mean. And I even saw something that is called Headscale, and it allows you to host your own Tailscale setup or VPN server, and yeah, that's pretty awesome. Like, now what I essentially wanted to talk about in this video is private services. Like I have one server that is serving all of my private stuff, internal stuff, let's call it internal. And then we have the public stuff. I have a completely different server for that. I'm not even using Tailscale on it. I'm just using that for things like websites or like public website, like anything that the actual public is supposed to reach. That I have that on a completely different server. So that's kind of how the setup is. That I would recommend you guys just use one internal service and one or server or machine and one public machine, and that's the whole setup that I would really recommend you guys. All right, that's it for this video. I hope you kind of understood what I was talking about, or what I was wanted to suggest to you. And hope I'm gonna see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.